Hello seamsters! I'm back with another video to help you with a sewing problem that you almost certainly don't have. I was asked recently to sew some name tags onto some BDU uniforms for a young soldier, and like I said, there's almost no chance any of you are having the exact problem I'm having here, but I thought it was interesting how this was put together originally and the problem it creates for me in trying to properly sew the patches on. So I'm just going to show you, and if you can't find an application for this, well then you'll have wasted 15 minutes of your life watching a YouTube video. So the issue here is the soldier in question got promoted to second lieutenant? No, first lieutenant? I think you get promoted from second lieutenant to first lieutenant. If I'm wrong, sorry. Something like that. Anyway, she got promoted, and once her insignia is put on, insignia? Is the plural of insignias, or whatever, anyway. She didn't want the Velcro left in place. So you could just have these on Velcro and stick them on. She wants them sewn on permanently, and if you leave the Velcro, it's really thick and stiff. So I'm going to take this off. I'm going to cover up her name, but so it'll look like this, and I'm sewing on new patches with her name and U.S. Army. The interesting part about this, at least I found this interesting, is as best as I can determine from looking at this, when these shirts are made, the shape of the shirt, without any of these folds shaped into it yet, the shape is cut out, and it appears that they then sewed these Velcro pieces on in predetermined locations before folding over where the snap placket and all that stuff is. And so what that does for me is there's a bar tack here, and then this fold that's got an overcast stitch on the edge, that's sewn down to create this covered buttonhole placket where the buttons go through. It's got a cover over, storm flap over it. This won't open up now. So this piece of Velcro is actually sewn only on the top layer. The stitches don't come through on this fold. So what I have to do is I have to seam rip the stitch that's holding this overcast seam down. It's overcast and then sewn down. In other words, the raw edge is overcast and then it's sewn in place after the folds are put in. So I've got to seam rip this out just enough to be able to get to the back of these stitches, seam rip it out, sew the other patch, the insignia, on, and then sew this back down. She brought me a couple of shirts that had already been done by somebody else, and what they did is they just sewed as far as they could. I think this is sewn with a machine. It might be that they hand stitch it. It looks like it's sewn with a machine, but they sewed as far as they could here and here and on the edges, and then sewed from the other side of this flap. To just kind of a pain. Probably arguably faster than what I'm going to do, and this is probably good enough for some people, but I'm going to take it apart and do it right. At least what I think is right. So what I want to do here is I just want to seam rip out the actual lock stitch, not any of the overcast stitching. And unfortunately for me, on this particular one, they did a pretty good job of overlapping them, so they're very, very close. So I've got some jeweler's magnifying lenses on so I can see it because I'm old. But I'm just going to take out as much as I need to be able to access the place I need to get to. I don't have a working overlocker here, so I don't want to have to do any repair work that requires overlock stitching. Now that I've taken out that lock stitch, I can open this up and I can get to the back side of these stitches for the Velcro. I hope I can get this to show up. So this last line of stitches on this edge of this Velcro patch is not this line of stitches. This line of stitches is holding this fold. But if we go inside here, it's going to be hard to see, but this line of stitches here is what I need to remove. And I can remove it from the other side, but the point being is that it's not just sewn through this fold, it's actually sewn to this before it was folded. Unfortunately, when this fold was sewn down, they also sewed through this piece of Velcro, so I will have to tie into this stitch line when I'm done. And just for the sake of over illustrating this probably trivial point, so all of the stitches that originally were used to attach this piece of Velcro to this fabric are gone. It's now just held in by the stitches holding down this fold, which were done after this was added. So I'll rip out just as few stitches as I can to get that off. So I've pulled out enough stitches from this cover stitched edge so that I can just lay this flat, and that way I'll be able to sew all the way around the patch, and then I can just put everything back together. I need to make sure I put this in the right place. I'm sewing this on my trusty Singer heavy duty sewing machine. If you're not familiar, I did a year-long evaluation of this machine and came out really liking it after expecting not to. I'll put a card to the playlist in the corner of the screen if you want to check that out. The thread I'm using is some Gutermann thread. It's a dark khaki color that matches the existing thread quite well. And I just picked that up at Michael's since Joann Fabrics went out of business. There might be a better matching thread that you could buy from an online source, but I didn't have the time to order anything, so this is what I'm using. For this last edge, I'm going to sew it down when I sew this fold back down and join these two cut stitches. I don't think there's any reason to have an extra pass on this side. And now I just have to stitch down this overcast edge again. So there you have it, the immense amount of trouble you have to go to replicate this exactly as it was originally. Well, I don't know the way the Velcro was put on originally. I don't know if this is how this is supposed to go. I just know that the insignia needs to go there. I looked online and tried to find the mil spec, the instructions for the placement of these things, and it doesn't really go into that much detail in terms of how to sew it on, obviously. So anyway, I just thought this was interesting. I thought it was interesting that these Velcro patches were sewn on before the folds and stuff were put into the shirt, and how that creates a little bit of a challenge if you want to make it look like it was there from the beginning. Is it worth all that trouble? Probably not, especially not for a BDU kind of thing. If it was like a dress blue or whatever it's called, some kind of fancy uniform, maybe it would be worth the extra trouble. Sometimes I like to cut corners and do things the easy way, but sometimes I kind of feel like this is the right way to do it, to really just dig in and get it where it's supposed to be. So anyway, hopefully you found something about that interesting or entertaining or something. If you like this content, subscribe, share it, click like, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. That's a hoot, man.
ha ha.